Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Whether you are live with us here on the call or watching the YouTube recording, we really appreciate your time and energy to dedicate to this very important program. We're so excited here at the International Relations Council to be introducing our World of Art series, which kicks off today with a discussion of art and conflict. My name is Evan Verplu, and I'm the Executive Director of the International Relations Council. And I know my coworker Dan have been really excited to present this series for a long time now, and we've got an incredible panel that's going to lead us through this capacious topic of art and conflict. So throughout history, the arts have played a crucial role in helping individuals and communities express their emotions, beliefs, and struggles during times of conflict. And this panel discussion will explore how artistic expression provides a voice for those affected by war, displacement, and social upheaval. So panelists will discuss how art can serve as both a form for resistance and a tool for healing. We will have time at the end of the program for questions from yourself, the audience. So if you just want to use the Q&A function, which should be if you're on a laptop or a computer at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you have any questions or issues about that, please let us know. But we hope that we can get to as many of your questions as time allows. And we really appreciate you again taking the time out of your Monday to share in this incredible program. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce all of our panelists as well as our moderator, and then we'll start with opening remarks from each of the panelists before moving into a dialogue with our moderator Cheryl Eva Costa, and then we'll go to Q&A with yourself, the audience. So firstly, Brian McCarty is a photographer, Fulbright specialist, board member for the International Toy Research Association, and the executive director of War Toys nonprofit organization. While comfortable in the studio, Brian's preferred approach is to integrate toy characters into real-life situations through the use of forced perspective, working in camera with minimal post-production. McCarty creates his photographs by sometimes traveling to exotic locations, including active war zones. Brian, thank you so much for being with us today. And Vlada Tepper is a poet and writer, teacher and learner, formerly a Fulbright scholar in Russia. Vlada is an 826 Valencia Teacher of the Month award winner and the founder and executive director of Inspiring Multicultural Understanding, a multicultural leadership program for immigrant youth. In her writing, Vlada is interested in the nuance and complexity of what is. Her writing explores the many facets of identity, the magic of relationships, and different journeys to self-connection and wholeness. Vlada, thank you so much for being here. And then we also have Ruth Daniel. Ruth Daniel is a multi-award-winning CEO and artistic director of the international NGO In Place of War, which is an organization working with music, art, and creativity in places of armed conflict, social injustice, and areas affected by climate change. A former co-founder of the groundbreaking alternative music industry event, Unconvention, independent record label founder and boss and musician, playing with many bands, but most notably the cult Manchester band The Fall. She's been a consultant in many international music festivals, including the Primavera Pro, Barcelona Shoko Festival in Zimbabwe, and the Doa Doa in Uganda. Ruth, thank you so much for being here. And finally, the moderator who will be leading us through this discussion is Cheryl Eva Costa, who is a full-time artist based here in the Kansas City Crossroads area, where she creates both standalone and custom art pieces and wearable jewels inspired by marine life. Cheryl's custom designs involve jewelry created, including jewelry created for former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, as well as designing and fabricating a 10-foot donor wall installation for the KC University Health's NICU in honor of those making a difference. Cheryl is also a wonderful board member for us here at the International Relations Council, and we thank you so much for leading us through this conversation today. So I'm going to turn it over to our panelists, Brian to start, and we'll get underway. Thank you so much, everyone.
So thank you very much for the invitation to be here. It is an absolute honor. I'm going to dive in since I've got other folks right behind me. Just jump into a slideshow here. So War Toys, at its core, is an arts and media organization. It was founded off of 10 years of work on a photo series about children's experiences of war. And this is an example from that, and I can kind of quickly take you through the process. It all begins by going to where the children actually are. In this case, this is a camp in northern Iraq in 2017, and this 8-year-old is named Noor, and she is drawing a story about her and her family fleeing Mosul during the ISIS occupation. And the Arabic writing says, "This is my life when we had to leave. There were a lot of people shooting at us." So my goal is to articulate and recreate her account with as much accuracy as I can. So I roamed every toy store, bazaar, everything you could find in northern Iraq to find the toys to play the characters from her account. We then went to the actual place. This is East Mosul, 2017. There's still an ISIS billboard up, and it's about a kilometer from the front lines. And then we staged the toys at the actual location. And as we're working, the patrol came through and got a laugh seeing what we're doing. And this is the end result. It is capturing, again, with as much accuracy as possible, her account in the actual place. And we're very fortunate that the work has been used by our partners, UNICEF, Chiani Foundation, Terrorism Italia, and campaigns around the world. We've done exhibitions, installations. This is from Photoville a few years ago. And we've been very lucky to get a lot of press, which is really part of the point of this is amplifying children's voices and having them understood and seen. A side effect of all this work is we know the toy market in all these places. That was Iraq before, this is Ukraine, East Jerusalem. And this is the Albertsons in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, next to a refugee camp in Iraq, seeing the exact same toys. In all of this, we came to understand there's just a handful of factories making this stuff. And so I became a Fulbright specialist, went to China, traced their roots, and started exploring ways of influencing their designs. And so War Toys has embarked on this ambitious program. Basically, I won't go through all this. The long and short of it is just giving generic toy makers better toy designs and letting them sell it and harnessing the existing market to impact millions and millions of kids. And we've started with the ubiquitous Army Man as sort of pilot and proof of concept. And we're introducing, just to start, a really small change. This is a photojournalist. This is Esma Wagi. She's Egyptian. She's an actual person. But that small change radically changes the play pattern from just us versus them to, go photograph war to rescue people to what have you. And if this seems like some new and radical idea, this is from the interwar period. Army men used to have that type of things in their bags. And we're doing this in a way to give children everywhere better role models and basing all of the photojournalists off of real people. This is Veronique de Vigary, and this is our lineup of our first 8 based on world-renowned photojournalists. So understanding the goal really is to get these into bags of Army men distributed everywhere. But also we understand that kids aren't going to have any idea of what these people actually do. They don't know about humanitarian work. So all these game sets come with these janky little cellophane maps. So we commissioned Nashra Balagamwala, she's a socially conscious game designer, to make us a game that replaces those maps with a game board. And she also said, you know what, it can't just be photojournalists. It needs to be frontline rescuers and aid workers. And we need to really teach kids about what war is like and what the people are like, making a difference. And because accuracy has been really important to us, our frontline rescuers are white helmets. This is one of the main subjects of the documentary Last Men of Aleppo. And the game sets are in production now, should be released for the next 2 months, but it's already been added to the permanent collection of the Young VNA. So we're feeling pretty confident about what we're doing. To increase the impact, we have created a mobile app of the game. Making it really easy to release it in over 25 languages, making it playable by 1.768 billion children around the world. And the game can be downloaded right now if you want to go check it out. And there is a lot more coming, but I'll save that for the discussion. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brian. We'll go ahead and move on to Vlada now.
All right, thank you so much. Brian, thank you. That's mind-blowing, the work that you're doing. And it's an honor to be here. And IRC, thank you so much for hosting this important conversation. If you could scroll up to the first slide. Yeah. Let's see if you can, yeah, keep going, keep going. So couple words about me while we are looking at slides. So I'm the executive, my name is Vlada Tepper. I'm the executive director of Inspiring Multicultural Understanding IMU Peace Club that has served over 3,000 youth. In the last 15 years, we work primarily with immigrant and refugee youth, and we run leadership programs that also focus on cross-cultural development and social emotional learning. I'm also a mindfulness coach, and I've been an educator for almost 20 years, working with the same populations and teaching a range of different subject matter from English literature to English language to creative writing to leadership to even physical education. And I am Moldova-born Jewish Russian American. I wanted to share a quote. Evan, there's one of the slides, if you see it, by Patricia Engel. And the quote is, "All immigrants are artists because they create a life, a future from nothing but a dream." I really love this quote by Patricia, who's a Colombian American writer. And I want to shout out my parents who dreamed, and we were lucky enough to be able to make it to this country. We are refugees, and were able to, because of the sacrifices they made, give their daughters, my parents gave their daughters a chance to dream and to create, dream up the lives that we are currently living. I want to also shout out, I've been very lucky to have so many teachers, and I just want to shout out a few of them. A lot of my philosophy and values come from Buddhism. And I want to mention Jack Kornfield of Spirit Rock in Northern California, Tenshin Rab Anderson, Mushim Ikeda, who are all Buddhist practitioners and teachers, and Homa Gudarzi, who is a Zoroastrian Buddhist teacher. I also want to mention Dr. Lisbeth Calleros, with whom I had the privilege to work, who led a professional learning community focused on youth and healing. And her work was focused on the book Hope and Healing in Urban Education by Sean Ginwright. Our conversations influence what I do, and you'll hear me share some writing. You'll hear that in the essay that I'm going to share. Finally, I want to shout out Diversity 2020 think tank, which I've been very lucky to be a part of for many years, which have also really informed my understanding and my work and my growth, professional and personally. So with that, I want to read a personal essay that I wrote, and you can see here the interweaving of the work that IMU does and the healing power of storytelling that you'll hear explored and from the voices of immigrants and refugees. And it's called The Lesson of Peace Club. And that's perfect. Yeah, we don't need slides for that. Okay. Balaji turned off the classroom lights and joined us at the table. My forehead wrinkled. I didn't expect our end of the year Peace Club party would start in the dark. Potluck goodies so vividly colorful a minute ago were now just scents. The aromas of Vietnamese spring rolls, naan, Salvadoran pupusas, vinaigrette, and a diversity of other foods filled the room. What was this 11th grader's plan for our afternoon event? He had emceed before, but never with the lights off. Plus, we only had an hour for this party. Would we have enough time? I had started the school program called called Peace Club years back because I wanted to see more peace and empathy in the world. Having lost my homeland of Moldova at the age of 10 due to intolerance, I didn't want this happening to other children. Yet it was. The Yemeni civil war had started in September. The war in Donbass had broken out a month earlier. Kids escaping violence in Mexico and Central America regularly enrolled in our schools. I hadn't realized that working on peace meant understanding conflict, or that I would have to face and understand emotions, especially my own, and that I'd have to give up control again and again. Having a 16-year-old MC a Peace Club party meant I had no idea what would happen next. Balaji cleared his throat. What is the best thing that happened this year? He faced a group of us teens and a few adults. We only saw his outline, short and muscular, but ease and authority permeated his accented English. Kids responded readily. Learning more English, replied many of the students, one at a time, chewing. Someone had a new dog. Someone else had a baby sister. One student got both. We laughed. Maybe it would go faster than I expected. I exhaled. Perhaps we'd even have time to play games and take group photos. What is the worst thing that happened this year? Balaji asked next. My heart raced. Emotions were unpredictable. What if we lost control? Too much trauma taking over. Wasn't this a party? Balaji began sharing. I don't know how to be with my dad. He's angry all the time. It is hard to talk to him. I miss my mom. She died when I was 5. Wow, someone said, man. Haidar, you're next, Balaji continued. Haidar took a sip of water. I miss my mom and brothers, he said. I can't see them because of the war in my country. I worry. My eyes were beginning to get accustomed to the dark. Now I could barely see because of my tears. Balaji put his hand on Haidar's shoulder. Karina was next. Each new sharing was vulnerable and heartbreaking. We grieved so many things. Losing a mother's trust, losing a friend to suicide, losing a grandparent. The last boy to speak was silent for a while. My mother has cancer, he said. I've always wondered what to do with emotion, with grief or intense fear, mine or other people's. How do you protect others, especially children, when you know that you actually can't? Together in the dark, the teenagers led the way. We cried and we hugged. Someone offered a blessing to the boy and his mom. Then another of us did, then another. An hour passed, 2 hours. Balaji had opened the door to both collective joy and collective grieving. He had opened the door to healing, to a sense of belonging to one another, to the human condition. So many times since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, I have wanted to turn away from the searing pain of the news, from today's reality. Then I think about Balaji's courage and his willingness to venture into emotion, into grieving. We need to keep listening to the kids, to each other, to survivors and witnesses of war, to keep our eyes open in the dark. Thank you for listening.
Thank
Wow.
you so much, Vlada. Ruth, if you'd like to go now, thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here. And wow, that was incredibly powerful, Vlada. And thank you, Brian, as well. It's a pleasure to share this space with you. I'm just going to talk briefly about the work that I do. Hopefully you can see, hang on, just sorry, bear with me a sec. You can see these slides. Okay, so yeah, I'm Ruth and I'm the Chief Exec and Artistic Director of, sorry, I'm just going to stop it from moving. 1 second, sorry, full screen, there we go. Yeah, so I'm the Artistic Director and Chief Exec of an organisation called In Place of War. So for the past 20 years, In Place of War is an organisation that's been using artistic creativity in places impacted by conflict, climate change and social injustice. So we work with these incredible networks of change makers, local people rooted in their communities who are using many different art forms to transform cultures of violence and suffering into hope, opportunity, and freedom. So we started in 2004 as a major research project at the University of Manchester with a question, and the question was, do people make art when bombs are dropping? And if they do, why are people making art at the most challenging times that we face as human beings? And what does that mean? And through the research that we did, we became connected to some really remarkable people who, against all odds, are making change in their communities. So 20 years later, we work with a network of about 130 changemaker organisations across 30 countries. So we work in these different areas, in places of conflict, but also places affected by climate change. And obviously the two are very linked. And also with people facing social injustice. We bring our work back to where we're based, which is in the UK and also the US. Our Changemaker network is spread all over the world, from Greenland to Brazil to Uganda and many more places. And I guess the key thing about our organisation is we are not the people who are making the work. We are not the people who are in the communities. We are working with local people, people who before us were making art, making change in their communities. And we exist to support those organisations with what they want. And that can range from a whole load of different things. It can range from creating cultural spaces, artistic spaces, music studios, education programs, all sorts of different things. Why art? So why is art important? So I think for me, art is really important as obviously a way for people to express themselves. For me, it's an opportunity for people to imagine a different world and imagine a different future and how they can get there and build that. But I think the most important thing that I've noticed that art can do is create communities, create positive communities of people supporting each other to kind of make that better future together. We do many programs across the organisation, but just a few. We have a programme called Hack Music, which is a catalyst fund which seeks to support music organisations, I guess, in some of the most, places that face the biggest challenges on the planet. And we support with funding, mentoring, equipment, education programs, for example, supporting Indigenous communities who are wanting to preserve their language and their culture and their art, or people who are wanting to create music on the front line of conflict. We also have a program called Agents of Change, and this is a really interesting program that brings the knowledge of the change makers that we work with in places of conflict to the UK and the US, helping people understand the amazing methodologies that people are using to make change and how maybe some of those ideas could be used by people in disadvantaged communities in the UK and the US. We also support the development of cultural spaces, quite often in gang-affected communities and places on the front line of conflict, to engage people away from conflict and give them, positive and creative opportunities. So over the past 20 years, as I said, we've done a whole bunch of different things. We do a lot of work around training and education in the creative industries. We also participate in research programs with academic institutions, making a case for the arts as a powerful tool to make positive change. We create cultural spaces, and we've done this in places like Palestine, Colombia, South Africa, Uganda, Lebanon, and Kenya. And we also mobilise artists and change makers around the world to create these incredible networks of peer-to-peer support and sharing. So we've done a whole bunch of things, as I said. We've written a bunch of books. We've created education programs. We also provide platforms for people to share their art and engage public audiences. And then finally, we work with students and people from different companies, again, to kind of share the knowledge of the change makers that we work with, that we think is really remarkable and very special, with students through kind of residency programs. And finally, yeah, I'll just end with a quote from Desmond Tutu about the work that we do. And thank you so much for listening.
Well, that was amazing. Brian, Ruth, and Vlada, it's amazing the social impact each of you are doing in this world. And thank you for sharing your stories. I have been reading a little bit about each of you, and I have so many questions, but I know we're limited with time. But one of them, I want to have it be a general question for everybody. And whoever wants to jump in first, you're welcome to. I think, Ruth, you've answered a few questions that I've had, but I think Brian and Vlada also offer different perspective that I think would be really informative to kind of learn about what your perspective is in regards to them. So in general, when working with war-affected children and or adults, how do you ensure that their art remains a tool of empowerment and does not re-traumatize them while telling their stories? It's a two-part question. And after that, how do you as an artist balance creative expressions with the emotional weight of the subject matter? So I can re-ask the question if you'd like, or...
You want to go first, Vlada, or do you want me to jump in? Oh, thanks. All right. So let's see. When working with war-affected children, it is, in our experience, so very easy to re-traumatize them, which is why it is so imperative to work with expressive therapists, folks who are trained, folks who know what they're doing. I often get questions of people expecting me to be asking the kids direct questions like, oh, tell me what happened in war. And there's just no responsible way to do that. So it takes very intentional methodology and just being careful. And then the second part of the question, so sorry. So balancing the emotional weight, I don't know if we're trying to balance it. We're actually trying to throw things off balance and sneak around people's defenses in a lot of ways. I mean, we're showing toys and you get people's nostalgia that sort of suckers them in, and the novelty of what we're doing as well. Like, oh, there's a guy taking pictures in a war zone. How weird. But that then makes people see these stories and understand these stories and empathize in a way that they wouldn't otherwise, because they put themselves in that. They're their toys. But anyway, I'll shut up now and let Lotta go.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, I'll jump in. So the first part of the question about working with youth, I think choice is absolutely critical. The youth have agency. They decide. So the leadership programs are peer-to-peer based, and the students are making decisions together about how they want to create workshops and events. What are the stories they want to tell and how do they want to share them? And art is often one of the tools. Different artistic expressions are the tools. So for example, one of our annual events is celebrating United Nations International Day of Peace. And so the students, the leadership cohort that year gets together and discusses what is important for us, what is it going to look like. And so students have written poetry on the topic of peace. They have created school-wide they have developed websites and created school-wide seeking of submissions that included writing and art and photography and quotes. So every year, actually, the event is different. The workshop looks different, and the honoring of the day looks different depending on that year's cohort, what they decide, and also what they identify would be helpful for the school that year. The students are all from different countries, and so it's always a lot of choice and very dependent on the specific voices in the room. And then the second part of the question about how I work as an artist with the emotional weight. My answer is that I cry a lot. And I find that, so when I write pieces that are especially like really get at something that feels very true to a lived experience, and I write a lot of nonfiction, I write poetry, and I also write personal essays, and then I'm also working on books. But with personal essays in particular, if I know that I've got something if I'm crying, and then of course I have to give myself space to put the writing away and to just be, and then look back on it. But with pieces that are particularly emotional, and it's cathartic, right? The body is healing through processing the experience, and sometimes it's secondary trauma. The piece that I read today, I cried a lot writing it, and it's processing the secondary trauma of that moment. Okay, Ruth, did you want to weigh in?
I mean, I think it's quite different for us because we're not necessarily making art directly with the communities. So we're sort of there's a kind of middle organization between us and the communities. So I guess we just trust that those organizations know their communities and know how to work with them in a way that's not re-traumatizing. And I think, in terms of the work that we do, we never dictate the art that's being made. That's not kind of our role. And I guess what our role is to kind of create positive and safe spaces for people to be able to create work in.
Great answers. Thank you for sharing that. In your opinion, why do creative expressions resonate so deeply in times of conflict or crisis? Who would like to start with that one?
I mean, I can maybe just kind of dip in. I mean, I think for me, art is just such a powerful way to reach people's emotions. And I think it's a way to be able to convey really, deeply complex situations in a way that kind of will engage people. And I think for me, art is just the most powerful tool to be able to tell stories and, engage people in those stories. So I think that's a lot of the art that we see is produced in the places and spaces that we work with around the world. It is just that, it's people telling their stories in a way that sometimes, maybe they can't just say, they can't say it. And so they'll produce something that reflects that. And I think that's incredibly powerful.
I've had the benefit of working with art therapists for all these years, and it is remarkable, really. My sort of concise answer is art works when words fail. Some experiences, some feelings are so big that you just cannot find the words for it. And for children in particular, their cognitive abilities develop faster than language skills. So they may have the same thoughts, the same feelings, the same everything, but couldn't tell you, oh, this thing happened, I feel this way. They have to draw, they have to have expression to bridge that gap. And it's universal. It works children, adults, and has been recognized since, I think, in a war period, really.
Yeah, I love those answers. I agree with all of that. I think emotion is contagious, and so people on the receiving end also feel that, the immediacy of it. And I think that just to sort of piggyback on what Brian was saying, when something happens, right, it's completely outside of your control. By creating, you are processing and having a sense of control. You're creating and imagining a new reality. So, yeah.
These are great. Vlada, I like how you say that emotions are contagious. And I could see, like, let's make art contagious. And like all of you are doing that in a way through your art, which is really beautiful. And going back then, that ties into my next question, which is, as creative, has education played a bigger role than art in achieving your social impact and success? has it helped you be where you are today by having maybe more education and teaching other people stuff, or is it works side by side?
I think for our purposes, it's side by side. I mean, we're using art to educate and to bring folks into these things they wouldn't think about otherwise. So very symbiotic.
Yeah, I think the same for us as well. I think, a lot of the organizations that we work with, there is, the production of art, but it does go hand in hand with kind of education and kind of informal education through the kind of making of art as well. So a lot of our work has been around creating creative education programs. So we have, for example, like a hack music education program, which takes people through the process of how they can make music and engaging people in how they can archive music and how they can create music festivals and so on. So part of that is education, and then part of that is the creation of the work as well.
For IMU, education is the central piece. We're based in a school, and it's an additional program during the school day. So there's leadership education, cross-cultural education, socio-emotional education. It's very, very rooted in learning together, learning different tools, and then practicing those tools and implementing them in peer-to-peer leadership. I think there's also another part of your question, which is like, our ability to get our voice heard maybe in our own educational path. Am I understanding correctly as well?
Yeah, in a way. And I think maybe each of you are artists, right? But maybe throughout the process, you've learned that adding education to your creative outlet has helped you further your career and maybe create a bigger social impact, if you will, by collaborating with art therapist or some other people in your field and educators. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love how you said that, Cheryl. Like none of our work, from what I'm hearing from others, and certainly not for me, is in silos. It's very much, there's so much collaborative in terms of working with kids, in terms of partnering with other organizations that are serving the youth. Um, and my work, the writing that I do, I mean, it's very much related to conversations. I'm part of communities. I'm always wondering, like, is there what else, what is additional education that is missing? Yeah.
Maybe could
And
I just come back on that, Cheryl, and just to add, I think for me, like in terms of learning and education, that's something that we're doing all the time. I think we're in this world that's constantly changing, and I think we're having to kind of keep up with the pace of that. So one of the things that we've kind of brought into our organization is a number of different advisory boards. So we have a youth advisory board, an artist advisory board, a climate advisory board. We also work a lot in music, so we have a music industry advisory board. And we have these kind of amazing communities around what we're doing, helping to shape the programs that we deliver. And then, as Lada said, to kind of echo as well, we work with partners. So everything we do is kind of collaborative and bringing in as many different platforms and partners as we can. So I think that's it. And we also work very closely with academia. And I think for us, there's always a case of kind of showing the impacts of what we're doing, understanding what that looks like, working with academics to kind of, again, make that case that the arts is really powerful, a really powerful tool to make change. So I think that sense of learning is just flows through everything that we do.
I was going to jump back in a little bit more as well and say a lot of just inspired so much thinking. What we're doing with the toy program, it's applied arts. I know that toys aren't thought of as a medium for artistic expression, but I come from the art toy movement where that was very much a thing. And so even though we're making very commercial products for the mass market, there is artistic intention behind it all. And there's an educational slant to it all as well. We understand that number one, for peace to have a chance, people need to actually understand war. And war play has become so taboo that we just don't educate our kids anymore. And I get you don't want to glorify war, so you don't want to do that. But at the same time, we've just left them with these giant questions that they don't have any answers to. So we're trying to bridge that gap and use generic toys as the medium. So, yeah.
Great conversations. I love it. I do have a question from one of our audiences that I'm just going to share. And if anybody else watching today has a question, please write it on the Q&A tab and I will look through it. So the question is, it feels like we're in such a difficult, troubling time, and definitely seeing in US concerns about silencing and censorship. Do you see your work as more important in these times? Are there ways in which you hope your work will be most impactful in these times? Are there ways in which we can support your work? So there's multiple questions. I'm happy to repeat them. The first one was, do you see your work as more important in these times? Are there ways in which you hope your work will be most impactful in these times?
I mean, I think for us, I said that someone asked me the other day, what do I want to do this year? And I just said, I want us to be more radical. I think that the world is in this absolutely terrible, terrible place. And I think that now is the time to be galvanizing, to be using the arts to help to try and, make a more fair and just world. So I think absolutely, I think that as things, descend into this chaos that we're watching around us, I think that now is the time. And I think the role of artistic change makers at the grassroots has never been more important. I think, change comes from the community, change comes from the local levels. It's about, coming together and making that positive change. So yeah, I think art is more important than ever.
Yeah, just have to agree with that completely and totally. It is in these times, especially, that artists and organizations can make the most difference and help inspire, help build a base of resistance, whatever that might be. With us in the toy program, we recognize that what we're doing would be unpopular even in the calmest of times. And now we're expecting to kind of get in some folks' crosshairs because we're promoting gender equality, racial equality, DEI, all the things that are, now somehow evil. But we think it's also a really good time to be making really cheap toys. I did mention those game sets are going to wholesale for less than $1.50 each. And so that we see as a tool of education as well, of accessibility, of making this so that everyone can get the same education.
Yep, I'll jump in and also say yes, yes, and yes. Yes, I think speaking out, creating art, writing, sharing work is incredibly important, and doing what we can to counter the silence. It is a very scary time, I have to admit. I am someone who was born in the Soviet Union and come from a place where there was lots of censorship, and it's having just, I would say, communities also like being allies and holding hands proverbially, or literally, but being an ally today, being in community, sharing work and finding courage together is incredibly, incredibly important. And to the second part of the question around how can you all listening support? First of all, thank you so much for joining and listening and being part of the conversation. You're already doing really important stuff by being in dialogue, and check out all of our organizations. And all of our organizations are doing, working with using art to heal, I work with kids, giving immigrants and refugee voice and leadership and confidence in a time where, like Brian said, somehow this is controversial, and also potentially unsafe. And I think, yeah, just learn more about the work that we all do, and also support the causes that you are really, really passionate about, because there's a lot of there's a lot of work that can be done, especially in this moment.
Okay, I have another question from an audience. Can you all share a bit about some of the people you've met through your work that have left an impact on you? It's a great question.
I'll jump into that. So I've been, other than the hundreds of amazing kids that I've met who are burned into my memory and always will be, the art therapists I've worked with. Two folks come to mind real quick. Judy Rubin, who was the original art lady on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and a pioneer in the field of art therapy. She's been incredibly generous with her time from the beginning. In like 2010, I reached out to her as, half-baked idea, like I want to work with kids in war zones. And she kind of introduced me to a bunch of folks. And it was through her and her connections I met Mira Saad, who's a Beirut-based art therapist, who is remarkable and more gifted working with war traumatized kids than anyone I've ever seen ever. And so, yeah, that would be my two folks.
So for me, I think probably where all of my work started was in Colombia, in a place called Medellin. And I've been working to make kind of music, alternative music industry events for a long time all over the world. And when I got to Medellin, I met this hip hop artist, and he said if it wasn't for hip hop, he'd be dead. And it sort of changed the way I understood the arts and what the arts can do and what music can do. And seeing the role that hip hop has played to help people get out of being in gangs and find kind of other alternatives and other options with that they can do with their lives, and just to see how powerful hip hop was across the whole of this city to give a lot of young men an alternative. And I think just the other kind of example of like who's continued to be inspiring for me is the people that we work with in Palestine. I think particularly at the moment, some of the cultural spaces that we're working with that have undergone a lot of very, very challenging times. And just I think the resilience of people and the capacity to keep creating and keep making during these, very, very difficult times is always really inspiring to me, and it helps, motivate me just to see how remarkable people can be in, some of these really terrible times that we face as humans.
This is such a hard question because there are so many people. So to choose, it's hard. I'll mention a few. I want to mention Gabriela Melano, whom I met in the early stages of development of IMU and immediately understood the vision and why this work is important and joined. She has now passed away, but she brought me to the Diversity 2020 community that I'm now a part of, and just was always wrestling with the questions of how do we find peace, how do we connect across difference, how do we break silos, and so she has been really, really inspirational. I want to also mention my program manager for IMU, Alexandra Blanco, who is a graduate of IMU Peace Club and has been an adult ally for a number of years now. He is about to graduate from college, and I remember there was one really beautiful moment that really impressed me when he was a student. We were on a camping trip, and we were in a large tent at night sharing stories. And someone shared a very, very heartbreaking personal experience. And you know, the deep emotion in the tent was palpable, and he just reached out and took hands of two people who were next to him and kind of in the moment just formed that chain of connection and literally held the space. And just really still that moment just where he knew what to do, right? Another example, like in the story that I read, of a young person creating healing, knowing how to create healing in the moment.
That's beautiful, Vlada. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and Brian, Ruth as well. I do have another question here from Chris. She shares, you are all inspiring. Thank you, Chris, for being here. Brian, I love the explanation of how you are evolving the toys available to encourage a different form of play and teaching around war. Are you familiar with the artist Aid Suleiman Hadalin from the West Bank, Palestine? Some info below going forward, if not. Then there's the link. The 2011 short film, Stop Action Animated, includes a touching artist statement about how and why the use of his art for expression, engaging kids, coping, and self-healing. I am a self-taught artist from Palestinian Budwan village of al-Kai, hope I'm saying this correctly. Well, in real life, these vehicles represent the oppressive Israeli occupation in my work. I render them back into a constructive element that can be appreciated again for positive use. I visited him in 2016 and invited him to exhibit his art along Oz in Berlin. And then there's another link there.
So I do know that artist's work, and it's inspiring. He takes found materials and recreates Israeli military vehicles. I've also seen really remarkable instances of this in refugee and IDP camps. There's a local toy industry of folks who will take whatever metal or scrap things they can find and make toys and sell them or give them away to the local community. So his stuff is amazing, and there are other artists doing amazing stuff as well. That's sort of folk art, commerce, weird combination, but amazing stuff. So, but folks who don't know it, I recommend checking it out. And thank you very much, Chris, for that.
So let's see if there's any other questions. I think this is it. Okay. So we do have a few more minutes. I don't know if anybody wanted to share any additional comments, or I can look through other questions that I have here.
The dealer's choice.
Okay, so I have a question for you. I don't think I asked it already, but what role do you think audiences play in responding to or engaging with art that focuses on conflict?
What was the first part of that question again? I'm sorry.
What role do you think audiences play in responding to or engaging with art that focuses on conflict? Like when you're sharing your work and what you're doing, what are you hoping when you're showing your art? For example, with you, Brian, is there a response maybe that you're hoping to get from your audience, or Ruth, and what is there an expectation almost for not, or?
I guess for me it depends on what the art is and kind of the kind of purpose of it. I think about one of the projects that we have, which is a project that brings together female artists from different places of conflict to collaborate together, and then we provide the platforms for those women to go and perform in major festivals, all over the world. And I think, they are creating music and songs about whatever it is that they want to share. And so I guess for us, it's about having as many people see that as possible, providing a platform for people whose voices are often marginalized. So this group is all women of color, women of different shapes and sizes, women of different ages, headlining festivals. You very rarely see that. And so I think for me, it's about then the response from the audience, which is amazing in this case, people absolutely love them. They go crazy and they go wild. And I think it's about that, just changing perception, showing what's possible. And for me, it's just to have as many people see that project as we can, and as many people engaging with them and their music and their stories. But then there are other projects that we do, where it's about audiences maybe participating in the creation of the art, or audiences sharing as widely as possible, the art. So I think it depends on what the art is, and yeah.
I think for us, it's a simple answer: empathy. The whole goal of everything that we're doing is to invite empathy. For adults, like I said, it's nostalgia. For kids, it's also an easy access point. And we've shown the work to children just as much as adults, and are very careful about image selection, but still have found to be very successful. And the questions that kids ask are profound usually, and express how much they just didn't know about this part of the world or didn't understand. Like, oh, they have toys there? Yeah, they have toys there. So really, it is all about empathy.
When I think about the role of the audience, I think it's really, really critical. It's the witnessing that is so important for healing. When artists create, when kids share their stories, the receiver, you're being witnessed. You are, and and I think about this also from like in storytelling or in dialogue with constructivist listening. If the other person is just holding space and just listening to the story, um, they're just receiving. They're just receiving, and to be received is part of the healing process. So I think that's true for a lot of different art forms.
This was great. Thank you, everybody. This was a really amazing panel discussion. I'm going to leave it to Evan right now, but it was a pleasure meeting you all, and thank you, everybody that was here.
Well, yes, I'd like to echo Cheryl. Thank you so much, everyone. Brian, Ruth, Vlada, your time and energy and the work that you're doing is so incredibly important, particularly at this juncture of time that we are in. It means so much that you were able to help us kick off this series. And I just put in the chat a link to the full series on our website. So we do invite you to attend one or multiple of our upcoming programs. We do have another, if you're not located in Kansas City, we do have another virtual offering. It's going to be on international arts in the US mainstream. That'll be on Wednesday, April 23rd. That'll be a virtual program on Zoom as well. But we also have some upcoming in-person programs here in Kansas City that will be live streamed as well. So if you're not in Kansas City, you'll be able to join any of these. But if you are here in KC, we invite you to come out. Wednesday, April 2nd will be International Travel Through an Artist's Eyes. Again, International Arts in the US Mainstream on Wednesday, April 23rd. Art Provenance on Wednesday, May 14th. Arts and Identity on Wednesday, May 28th. And Diplomacy Through Music on Wednesday, July 2nd. So we very much encourage you to come out to those. Again, thank you so much, Cheryl, for your expert moderation, and to each and every one of our panelists. It means so much. And to our audience members, whether you're here or watching the recording, thank you so much for engaging with this topic. And we'll hope to see you again soon, and enjoy the rest of your Monday.